We have no delegations this evening. We have a number of public hearings. Before we open the first public hearing, I'm just going to outline the process that we're going to follow. First of all, I will ask if anyone is present to speak in favor of the application. The applicant will speak, and then anyone else in favor gets to speak. Letters in favor of the application will be read out. I will ask if there's anyone present to speak against the application. Those against will speak. Letters against will be read out into the record. And finally, the applicant can respond to any concerns being brought forward. Council can ask questions at any time, and there's a 10-minute limit on speakers or presentations. And just please make sure to use the microphone so your presentation can be heard on the video that's recording. So we'll open the first public hearing. This is for conditional use PC 9-22. This is for Sandu at 103 First Street Northwest. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing?
Yes, Mayor Ferris, it's Chris Bierce. Good evening, Mayor Ferris, Councillors, Associates. I'm the owner of the property. Preet Sandu is the developer who's looking to purchase the property and is the applicant on these. And Brian is the engineer with the building plans and that, and here to answer any questions that you may have. And Russ is the builder of the project. So I had sent a letter of support to council for this meeting, and which you have, and then there's various other questions that we can answer if they come up.
Did council have any questions for Mr. Beers at this time?
Does he want to read his letter, or does he want me to read it?
Mr. Beers, do you want to read your letter, or do you want Diane to read it into the record?
Do you need it read? There's quite a bit there, so do you want me to read it?
If you wish to, sure.
Sure, okay. Hello, Lynn. Could you please submit this email to council as a letter of support for the application PC 9-22, conditional use, and PC 10-22, variations to be presented to council March 28th, 22. The core area has a very limited supply of good quality rental options and no new build projects. This project would create some needed core area housing units. Based on our rental company's experience, there are requests, but not very many quality options for individuals to choose from. To be able to provide the most economical housing, the construction cost must be controlled. This project gives a density to a core area lot. By having multiple units on a smaller property, you're able to lower the cost base. Currently, there are buildings in the downtown core area with residential on the upper levels. A few notes on this. A lot of residents in the core area do not have vehicles, so parking is not an issue for them. Also, existing units do not even have any designated parking spaces. These residents tend to live, work, walk as part of their daily lives. For your review, I've included the CMHC demographics for core area in Manitoba, which was part of the submission. Particular to this lot, the immediate area does have a number of residential multifamily homes, and best use would be towards core area housing. Lorne Avenue does not have any business enterprises, and this project fits in more to current use than commercial. The proposed plans does supply 8 parking spaces with 8 living units, so each unit can be designated a parking spot. As mentioned prior, many individuals do not own a vehicle, so would not need a spot or could have the choice to sublet their spot. Snow clearing and garbage pickup is the responsibility of the property owner, so this should not be a burden to the city. If problems arise, as with any other property within Portage, we have our bylaws that would rule. The developer has asked for several variations to this project, and please review. The project looks viable from a common sense use perspective and fits into what is intended to achieve. As per zoning bylaw, Part 5 commercial zone does indicate this type of development to encourage high-density residential uses. Zoning is C2 and multifamily dwelling is conditional use for the area, with notes 5.2b must be located above first floor. These two notes do not fit together. If you look at the development in our community, please look into our history and see when the last time anyone has built a commercial floor-level building with residential above. We encourage and then we put a condition that drives away this kind of development. In closing, this project gives individuals a choice within the core area, fits into the neighborhood, supplies a need. This would represent, in my views, a true core area initiative. The developer is asking for no monetary help or public concession and is assuming the full viability of this project. Thank you for taking the time and to review my support of this project. And then there had been noted a few with the variation. Do we go into the variation now or look at that later?
No, that hearing is coming up right
Yeah,
after
all
this.
right. That was my notes on the support of this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beers. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor?
Should I speak as applicant as well, or?
If you wish to, it's up to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and esteemed councillors. So my name is Karen Paul Sandu, and I'm looking to develop this project in your neighborhood. Russ and I were already building at 18th and Park, building those apartments for a client. And so over the last few months, I've had a look around your city and identified this lot that Chris currently owns. I feel it would be, the project would be an asset to the neighborhood. Brian Mansky has designed several of these projects for my company and others that I know of in Winnipeg. And so we aspire to build quality housing that fulfills a need. And therefore we came up with this idea for this particular lot. We are trying to get the conditional use designation, and the reason for that is that we'd like to get underway with construction right away so that there's no delays. So therefore, we'll discuss further in detail about why we think it's a good and viable project for the neighborhood, but I stand in support of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandu. Any questions from council? Okay. Are there any other letters in favor to be read out?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone present who would like to speak against the application? Okay. Are there any letters against to be read into the record?
No, there are not.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved, and I so move, that the public hearing for conditional use PC 9-22 for Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited for 103 First Street Northwest now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, council, in front of you, you'll see a report to council. The first thing I want to do is draw your attention to the sketch for the conditional use as well. So it's to the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and as we heard, it's a request for a conditional use for the applicant owner Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited. As you heard, the issue is to allow a dwelling multifamily in a C2 or a central commercial zone. As always, council, we have the opportunity to approve the conditional use as is presented, to approve the conditional use with conditions, or to deny the conditional use application. And again, as you heard, Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited has applied for a conditional use to allow for a dwelling multifamily in a C2 central commercial zone. If this conditional use is approved, the variation, or PC 1022, which is next, will require council's approval. If approved, applicant will be required to provide a full set of stamp plans showing how it will be constructed, and a building and plumbing permit will be required. For this conditional use, the application was circulated to various city departments. There were no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and as you can see, there are no objections. So with that said, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of Preet Sandhu, 73688 Manitoba Limited, to allow for a dwelling multifamily in a C2 central commercial zone at the property 103 First Street Northwest, which is legally described as lots 352, 353, Plan 12 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So we'll open the public hearing for variation PC 10-22. This is for Sandu at 103 First Street Northwest. Is there anyone here present to speak in favor of the application?
First, councillors, yeah, I would speak in favor of the application. Do you just want me to go through any of the concerns that we had with the various city departments?
If you wish, yes.
We walk through that. Okay, there was a couple of things that were brought up. Reducing the north side yard could increase the possibility of fire exposure and collapse of the property to the north. They're looking at reducing it to 2.03 meters. A normal building on a residential property is 1.5 meters. And as Brian has indicated also with the side yard, that being a two-story building, this has a 45-minute fire rating. So it does have a better fire rating than a residential property. So I don't think that should be a big concern. Secondly, also reduces the working space for fire-related operations on the fire attack, again, which is no different than any residential property that has 1.5 meter side yard. Reduction in parking stall size and number of spaces. The accessibility to the building and apparatus placement could be difficult on the west side, especially in winter months. Again, this is just a note. It is a parking lot, so it is open. If it was any other property, you could have a fence there and have the same issue. Location and type of garbage bins, where would they go, and would they pose a fire risk to any property? They've clearly indicated on the sketch where they have made provisions for the garbage bins, so that has been taken care of. Nowhere to store snow, so we'll likely lose 1 or 2 spots in the winter, which is an assumption. The city does not clean this back lane in the winter, so it would be the applicant's responsibility to clear, which has been assumed that yes, they would be clearing the back lane and the snow. Front yard reduction will reduce visibility for vehicles and pedestrians at the corner of First and Lorne. I did send a photo of that, and right now from the curb, we have 3.9. Currently from the curb to the property line, we have a total of 6.24 meters. And when you look at, I had spoken with Lynn earlier, and the restricted area is 3 meters. And when we do the calculations, even on the property line itself, we have an excess of 3 meters of unrestricted sight line. So I think we have that covered. Concerns about the significantly reduced north side yard and the impact to neighboring property. Again, I think we've addressed with the side yard. The fire rating of this particular building will also compensate for that. The building size is taking up almost all of the yard space, which may not be a good idea for visibility on the corner. Again, that has pretty well been cleared that we do have good sight lines to Lorne and First Street. And those were the answers to the questions that had come up.
Okay. Did council have any questions for Mr. Beers? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Beers, thank you so much for the presentation and clarifying some of the maybe concerns at this point. The only question I have is for when I'm looking at the sketch and I look at the public lane, which is off Lorne Avenue going north, where of course the parking stalls are. You mentioned that the snow removal or the snow clearing would take place, and you maybe lose a couple of parking stalls. Would there be any provisions made by the owner to clear and remove the snow?
I'll let Pete speak on that.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We fully intend to do that, yes.
Okay.
We'd remove the snow from the property
Okay.
to a designated site and keep the stalls clear at all times.
Got it. And thank you. My only concern was the ability to park there, of course, in the wintertime, and then, of course, being a public lane. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
good. Thank you, Your Worship. That's my only question.
Any further questions from council? Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to speak in favor of the application? Are there any further letters to be read into?
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, just to elaborate further on the.
Sir, could you state your name for the record, please?
Brian Mansky.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so to elaborate further on the fire protection to the building, zoning has requirements for side yard setbacks of relationship of buildings to property line, but the building code itself has further restrictions on the placement of the building to the property line based off of the area of the wall, the amount of glass that's in the wall. And when we do these two-story buildings, I've always started off with a 2-meter side yard to get us into a classification that allows us in excess of 10% of windows to be in that sidewall, so we get a little bit more glass in it. That combination, building code minimum combination of a 45-minute rated wall, the limiting distance that that building is to the property line that's our national building code. That's a fire safety standard everywhere. So we can't do anything less than what the building code asks for on that, and it's been considered safe practice. And well, of course, we follow that. Okay.
Council have any questions?
Can I just ask him to spell his last name for the minutes?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just get you to spell your last name for the minutes? Mansky?
Yep, Mansky.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Any further letters in favor to be read out? And is there anyone present who would like to speak against the application? And any letters against the application to be read into the record? Okay. And final word to the applicant, if the applicant wants to say anything about the concerns that were raised?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Need a motion to close the public hearing?
Be it resolved, and I so move, that the public hearing for variation PC 10-22 for Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited, 103 First Street Northwest, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer, seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, in front of you, you'll see the report to Council. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is the site plan, which gives you a detailed description on the building, and secondly, the sketch or the area of where it is. So this is file number PC 1022, a request for a variation for Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited. So the issue is the applicant is wishing to vary the following. I'll read it once. It's to allow residential on the main floor in a C2 central commercial zone, that the area of the property from 929 square meters to be reduced to 663.32 square meters, that the width of the property from 30.5 meters to be reduced to 20.72 meters, the front yard of the property from 9.1 meters to be reduced to 1.43 meters, the north side of the property from 4.6 meters to be reduced to 2.03 meters, the south side of the property from 4.6 meters to be reduced to 2.28, the rear yard of the property from 7.5 meters to be reduced to 7.01 meters, parking to be varied from 12 parking stalls to be reduced to 8 parking stalls, and the parking stall width from 2.75 meters to be reduced to 2.43 meters. As usual, we can approve the variation application or deny the variation application. The background, I will not go through those again. They are an exact replica of the issue up top. But I do want you to draw your attention that if the applicant's conditional use, which is PC 922 for a dwelling multifamily, is denied, this variation should also be denied, as this variation is specific for the dwelling. We know that didn't happen. If approved, the applicant will provide a full set of stamp plans showing how it will be constructed. A building and building permit will be required. Now, the building is in a C2 central commercial zone. The application has been circulated to the various city departments with the following concerns, and these had been addressed by the applicant. Reducing the north side yard could increase the possibility of fire exposure and collapse onto the property to the north. Also reduces the working space for fire-related operations and fire attack. Reduction in parking stall size and the number of spaces, the accessibility to the building and apparatus placement could be difficult on the west side, especially in winter months. The location and types of garbage bins where they would go and they would pose a fire risk to any property. Nowhere to store snow, so they will likely lose 1 or 2 spots in the winter. The city does not clean this back lane in the winter, so it would be the applicant's responsibility to clear. Front yard reduction will reduce visibility for vehicles and pedestrians at the corner of First and Lorne, and concerns about the significantly reduced north side yard and the impact to the neighboring property. And the building size is taking up almost all yard space, which may not be a good idea for visibility to the corner. Excuse me. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. And there have been no objections. So it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Preet Sandhu and 73688 Manitoba Limited to vary the following. To allow residential on the main floor in a C2 central commercial zone, the area of the property from 929 square meters to be reduced to 663.32 square meters. The width of the property from 30.5 meters to be reduced to 20.72 meters. The front yard of the property from 9.1 meters to be reduced to 1.43 meters. The north side of the property from 4.6 meters to be reduced to 2.03 meters. The south side of the property from 4.6 meters to be reduced to 2.28 meters. The rear yard of the property from 7.5 meters to be reduced to 7.01 meters. Parking to be varied from 12 parking stalls to reduced to 8 parking stalls. And the parking stall width from 2.75 meters to be reduced to 2.43 meters. I'm going to add in J, and J would be that it's responsibility of the property owner to make sure that the public laneway is cleared for access to the parking stalls as in the described plan. And at the property known as 103 First Street, to be removed and, or cleared and removed. I'm going to get Ms. Van Aert to read that back to me. At the property known as 103 First Street Northwest, which is legally described as Lot 352, 353, Plan 12 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Okay, Councillor Meyer, I didn't catch it all. So J, it is the
J
responsibility.
would be the responsibility of the owner to keep the public lane, the public access lane clean just for the access to the parking stalls and to remove the snow in the winter.
Okay, so J, it is the responsibility of the property owner to clear the public access lane for access to the parking stalls and to remove the snow in the winter.
Correct. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Buds.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's common practice for us when these types of things are brought forth to council to circulate amongst city departments. And so, I appreciate the effort of the applicants to come and mitigate the concerns. And, from my chair, at least, I look at a lot of these as being operational observations versus legitimate concerns to development. And so I think the applicant has done a really good job of mitigating those concerns for us here. It will be it will still be a concentrated residential development, but it is, as Mr. Beers had alluded to, it is basically dealing with infill, and it is dealing with housing, and I think it's a good thing here in the city of Portage, and I will be supporting it.
Any further questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to echo Councillor Budd's comments. I think it's something that's needed within our downtown corridor, specifically in the area that it's in. I certainly will be supporting it as well. I guess the only thing that I would ask is where these things come up. I have not seen them before in a lot of situations, and I know Councillor Bud's referred to it as our traditional operational things, but I was just wondering maybe if I could get clarification on why these concerns had come up. Maybe I could speak that through to our city manager.
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, are you referring to fire safety issues, or is there particular items that you...
Sorry, let's just deal with the fire safety issues. The rest of the stuff is really a non-starter for me.
Great. Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, I'm glad you've given the administration the opportunity to address some of the fire safety concerns. There has been additional information from the applicant and some clarification. So I think there's an opportunity for our Director of Public Safety to speak to that, because I believe there's a wish to amend some of the comments from administration regarding the fire safety issue. So I would ask that Mr. Carpenter come to the lectern and speak to those items.
So good evening. Yeah, after a secondary review of your variation, I apologize in the fact that there are concerns, but we'll describe it as a learning curve between the new chief and the old chief. And we had a discussion, but it got missed on removing it. So I apologize for that.
So Chief Carpenter, just so we're clear, so there are no concerns about those concerns about fire prevention are removed?
Right, so I guess the primary one, as an example, on the north wall, that will be addressed through the building code. So when it comes to a certain distance, then you have a higher fire separation rating. As indicated, could be 45 minutes or an hour. They'll be limited on the windows as far as collapse goes. Again, we can have that on any structure, so I'll describe it as a learning curve. They are concerns, for sure, and brought up, but I'll leave it at that, I apologize that maybe we did have discussions, but it wasn't removed from the recommendation, so apologize.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Your Worship, just to clarify the administrative process, which I think Councillor Meyer was also asking about, we get the information from the applicant, we circulate through all departments, we kind of put all different departments put their concerns forward, we review those concerns, and we try to narrow down the ones that are most relevant to the application and we feel council should be aware of. So in that process, the fire safety ones probably would have been removed in a later process, but as Chief Carpenter had mentioned, there was just one, he would like to remove those from consideration of council. He believes they'll be addressed to the building code.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. That's all I had.
Further questions, Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Your Worship. As we're looking at something as close to the neighboring property as 2 meters, do we have an official survey on this property to ensure that we're not encroaching on the north property?
Your Worship, I'd probably refer that to planning about the process if there's a requirement to submit a survey. I'm not aware of that step at this point, but if you give me one moment, Councillor Draycott. Thank you for your patience. So there will be a requirement for the survey for the variation eventually. If council approves this variation, it will go to the planning department. There will be requirement for that survey to be conducted before the building occurs, but there's not a requirement to provide a survey in advance of this variation to be approved.
Okay, further questions or comments on the motion? None? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Okay, we'll open the public hearing for conditional use PC 11-22. This is for McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest. Okay, so we'll open the public hearing for conditional use PC 11-22. This is for McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest. And just before I begin, I'm just going to outline our process for public hearings so everybody knows the process. I will ask if there's anyone present to speak in favor of the application. The applicant will have a chance to speak, and then anyone else in favor of the application. Letters in favor will be read out into the record. I will then ask if there's anyone present to speak against the application. Those against will speak. Letters against will be read out into the record. And finally, the applicant gets a chance to respond to any of the concerns being brought forward. And council, of course, can ask questions at any time during the process. So I'm going to ask if there's anyone present that would like to speak in favor of the application. Andrea, could you state your name for the record,
Yes,
please?
it's Andrea McCabe.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here today to ask you to consider the approval of the proposed secondary suite located at 102 First Street Southwest. As you are well aware of this project, I will not dive deep into the details that have been discussed over our past 3 applications. Instead, I would like to apologize for putting council in this difficult position to make a decision on a project that is standing and almost complete except for the plumbing. I would also like to apologize to all of our neighbors for putting them in a position where they felt duped. The structure over the garage remains vacant and has only been used to store my mother-in-law's belongings since we complied with the order from the planning district prior to our 3rd application for a secondary suite and subsequent denial of our application in late 2020. My mother-in-law, Joanne McCabe, left the province in December of 2020 to stay with family in Alberta as she had felt she had outstayed her welcome residing in our home. She then returned in the early summer 21 to gather her summer clothes and a few belongings and went back out west to reside in a campground in a motorhome provided by a family member. She has been living out of a suitcase and bouncing from one family member to another for over 3 years. This, of course, has caused financial and emotional stress as well as sadness for everyone in her family and, of course, Joanne. We are willing to do whatever it takes to enable Joanne to live in the home that she has put the majority of her retirement savings into. In our previous applications, our neighbors directly to the east and south of the structure have brought forward some of the following concerns that we have either rectified or are able to rectify. Some were fire, safety, and privacy. We feel that we have rectified the concerns over the fire safety by installing fire shutters on the east and south facing walls. There's also fire-rated drywall on both the east and south walls. And as far as privacy goes, we are willing to frost the windows on the east side so that Joanne can't see directly into the neighbor's yard or house, but still allow light into her space. We have unfortunately lost valuable time with my mother-in-law, and as such, she has suffered, of course, financial and emotional hardship and doesn't have a place of her own to live. If council is wary of approving the conditional use as presented, would they consider approving the application for a 2 or 3 year term, or a term that would be suitable to council as a trial run? Or designate the use to Joanne only as long as she should choose to live there? This would allow Joanne to have a home for the specified time period with an option of reapplying again at another time. I know that everyone around this table and in our neighborhood would like to move on from this issue at hand. It has brought division and hard feelings. I truly believe that by allowing Joanne to live in the suite, it will bring the neighborhood together. She is a lovely person who enjoys to get to know people, putter around the yard, tend to her garden, cook for the people she loves, and enjoy happy hour with the neighbors. As I've discovered, life is short, and what really matters is spending time with your family and friends. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Council have any questions for Ms. McCabe? Okay. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Okay. Any letters to be in favor to be read out into the record? No. Okay. Is there anyone present to speak against the application? Are there any letters against the application to be read into the record?
Yes, there are. Shall I go ahead?
Please.
Okay, the first letter is from Jennifer Baker. Please accept this letter as a submission against the application for 3 variances related to the property of Justin and Andrea McCabe. I understand they are looking for a conditional use as well as variances related to distance to neighboring properties, PC 11-22 and PC 12-22. I am very concerned that this is coming to council for the 3rd time. It has been refused twice, and I think it is unfortunate that it is being brought forward an additional time. I do not think this is a good use of municipal staff time. As previously noted in the 2 denials, the owners made these choices against the bylaws knowingly and tried to mislead council in this regard. This is very concerning and undermines trust with neighbors and the community. Additionally, we have noted that this property was listed for sale in the past year. The owners clearly have considered selling the property and could stand to benefit financially without maintaining any commitment to the neighborhood or how the property will be used. This again breaks trust within the neighborhood. Please do not approve these applications as they do not support the best interests of the community. Sincerely, Jennifer Baker. The next one is from Ken Neufeld and Diana Messington Neufeld. Dear council members, we oppose the requests for both applications, PC 11-22 and PC 12-22. When the city building rules and regulations regarding yard requirements were constructed, I'm confident that there was sound reasoning to establish them at 1.5 meters. To change the rules now without adequate evidence to justify changes would set a precedent that would encourage and allow building however a builder wishes. To approve conditional use for a suite that purposely refused to comply would suggest there is no need to follow regulations, but just ask for forgiveness. I would hope that this is not the intent of council. Respectfully, Ken Neufeld and Diana Messington Neufeld. The next one is from Jim Brands and Lori Collier. Dear councillors, we are writing to express our concern about Justin and Andrea McCabe's applications for conditional use and variance for the garage and illegal suite located at 102 First Street Southwest. This application was initially refused on October 15th, 2019, and rather than the applicant making the required changes to the property, the applicant reapplied in December of 2020 and has now made yet another application. The applicant's blatant disregard of the city's bylaws and the arrogance of repeatedly applying for something that has already been denied for very good reason is both astonishing and troubling. If they are allowed to proceed, why would anyone need to apply for a building permit in the future? If there are no consequences, why would there need to be a consult with the planning district? We urge you to reject this application again for the same reasons as it was rejected in the first place, and to enforce the changes that were deemed necessary in October of 2019. We would also appreciate if the applicant was denied any further applications on this matter. It seems unfair that this continues to be a contentious issue in an otherwise harmonious neighborhood after City Council has already made a decision regarding this property. Sincerely, Jim Brands and Lori Collier. The next one is from Elena and Leonard Rossnagel. Mayor and Council, we are unable to be present in person at the hearing today and want to be sure our opposition to the granting of a conditional use is heard. If you approve the conditional use, we strongly object to the proposed variances. I have prepared a presentation with slides that is attached to the agenda. It reiterates the same points we successfully presented at the hearing in 2019 and 2020. Nothing has changed since those hearings, so that presentation merely repeats the points we made then. Please consult it for details of our opposition to the granting of a conditional use and the variances. We have lived at 151 Tupper Street South in Portage la Prairie since 1992. We know that neighborhoods are successful through openness and trust. Our neighborhood has been brought together more closely than ever before in our opposition to the build at 102 First Street Southwest. What we were told was to be a garage with second-story storage became a house with a first floor garage. We trusted the assurances given to us by the applicants only to learn at the first hearing that it had always been the applicant's plan to build a house. This was just wrong. We want to thank the Mayor and Council for hearing our objections and taking them into account in your decision on this request. Respectfully, Elena and Leonard Rossnagel. So their presentation is attached. I won't go through it all, but it was there for Council's review before this hearing. The next one is from Lori Carlson Judson and Dave Judson. Dear Mayor and Council, re PC 1122 and PC 1222. We remain opposed to the conditional use request PC 1122 for McCabe property 102 1st Street Southwest and continue to see the construction of this structure as illegal, a disregard for other property owners' rights, and a blatant refusal to follow building bylaws. We also do not support the request for variance PC 12-22. What was claimed by the McCabes from the beginning of construction to be a garage with storage was, by their own admission, a fully conceptualized and constructed residence with all the infrastructure and amenities to support habitation. As the project neared completion, they asked for changes to zoning, requested conditional use, and applied for several variances to accommodate their blatant non-compliance with building laws. We understood after the last hearing at council that the structure would be allowed to exist as a garage. The fact that it has been built too close to property lines as a garage is still an issue. To designate it as a residence, which they fully admit was their plan from the time they bought their home, should require clearance to the property lines designated for residential dwellings. The diagram provided to homeowners in the area, along with the request, is inaccurate and does not show the true proximity to neighboring properties. According to property surveys, the structure is known to be much closer to neighboring property lines than the diagram indicates. Those in neighboring properties are aware of the actual proximity. However, the diagram may cause others to believe that this is an accurate depiction of how the building is situated on the property. It is not. The McCabes recently sent a letter to neighbors requesting that we share information with them on our interactions with Mr. Brooks at Portage Planning. They requested that we meet to discuss the situation with them and recognize their desire to gain access to the property built above the garage and accept their acknowledgement of their deceptions. We did not respond to this as their issue is with the city, though the repercussions impact us. We feel that to give conditional use for this property would make a mockery of city bylaws, the people responsible for upholding them, and to community members who follow them responsibly. To allow for conditional use would be to accept this continuing deception. In closing, we remind council that 30 neighbors had signed a petition to deny this request the first time the McCabes sought approval by the city. Nothing has changed except for the stress that continues to build in our neighborhood as the situation goes unresolved and we are challenged with answering to the same request year after year. Yours sincerely, Lori Carlson Judson and Dave Judson. And the last one is from Don Klippenstein and Galen Tibiatowski. To the Mayor and Council. So here we are 2.5 years after our community had spoken out against the blatant and purposeful attempt of one of our community members to circumvent the city's building bylaws and codes. We are being notified of a third request for conditional use, basically asking if our position in this matter has changed. Following the October 2019 council meeting, focusing on the McCabe's first application for conditional use, we were under the impression that the situation was going to be rectified. At that time, 30 community members signed a petition expressing their desire for the city to deny the owners of the property permission to use their newly constructed detached garage as living quarters. As well, several community members expressed their outrage in this matter via the editorial column of our local newspaper. What appeared to be the common concern and the questions being raised in the community back in 2019 was, what is the point in having bylaws, building codes, permits, etc. in the first place when a city resident can seemingly do whatever pleases them without any consequences whatsoever, making a mockery out of the system? We and others believe that the city would address the breaking of the city's codes and bylaws and reassure citizens that yes, the bylaws are in place for a reason and would be upheld. It remains obvious today that the intentions of this new build were never in alignment with the initial plan that was sent out to the residents of our neighborhood seeking our approval at the onset of construction. At that time, none of us were aware of the true deception that was in the making. Therefore, we accepted the initial request for variance as it was presented to us, a garage that was to be built a bit higher to have some extra room for storage. It was not until the point where the patio doors and balcony were being constructed that we suspected that this garage was not being built as we were misled to believe. Plans were in the works to put more than just boxes up there. At that time, we were not even aware of all the other infractions that had occurred with regard to the bordering property lines, the true size or footprint of the structure, and the actual purpose for the structure, which truthfully, if one wants to store their mother above their garage, so be it. We truly would not have had any problem with that at all. It was the deceitful and underhanded way that this build went up that was and continues to be concerning to our community. In spite of attempts to slow the construction of the garage, the work continued. When in October of 2019, City Council denied the first request for conditional use, we were pleased to know that the system was working. When the second request for conditional use went in a year later, we were relieved to hear that Council once again denied the application. While the City has denied these requests, we feel that the consequences for those who sidestep the system with their own agendas are weak and send dangerous and mixed messages to community members if they are not upheld. To allow conditional use after being made fully aware of the deceitful manner in which this garage went up, including the disregard for our city's codes and bylaws, leaves the door wide open and invites others to do as their hearts desire on their property, and maybe even on their neighbor's property, without consequence, and condones the adding to or the changing of one's property first and then applying for the variances after the fact to sanction intentional flouting of laws. We would be remiss if we did not address the diagram of the property in question that was included in the mailing of the notice of hearing of application for variance that was sent out to our neighborhood. Please refer to the diagram at this time. You will notice that the disclaimer at the bottom right of the diagram reads "not to scale." This is laughable at best. The disclaimer should have read, "not at all an accurate depiction of the property." From all appearances, one is led to believe that a vehicle could maneuver around the garage with ease, when in fact a small child would have difficulty navigating the perimeter of that garage with the space that is available. Perhaps this was yet another attempt to deceive the community. If not, what, may we ask, was the actual purpose intent of the enclosed diagram? If the intentions were truly to give our community an accurate picture of the garage in comparison to the surrounding buildings and property lines, may we suggest that Google Earth and drones are now available and are commonly used to do just that? In conclusion, we want Council to be aware that this ongoing situation is causing undue tension and stress in our neighborhood. We hope that Council takes this into consideration when responding to the appeal process so we do not continue to face this year after year. If you are, after hearing our concerns, still unclear as to whether our position in this matter has changed, our response is a resounding no, it has not changed. Why would it change? The situation remains the same. We do not approve of the variances that have been applied for after the fact on this property. Respectfully submitted, Don Klippenstein and Galen Tibiatowski. And the diagram is attached. And that is all the letters.
Okay, thank you. Before we close the public hearing, the applicant, if you wish to, can respond to any of the concerns that have been brought forward.
I'd just like to say that the reason that like the building is where it is when we went to the planning district to apply and received our building application, we were told we were grandfathered in because of the existing carriage house that was on the property and that we had removed. And as like the stake, when I guess we put the stake in the ground, it was out 3/4 of an inch over 40 feet. So that's how come it's closer on the, I believe, the southeast side. And that's when we did the R2 application, and which was subsequently removed from the agenda that day because it did not apply to the zone because it is not connected to the house. So when they, but on that day there was no variation for side yard on that agenda that day. It wasn't until the city passed the secondary suite application that we applied. And then that's when the side yard variations came into effect. So the building was already there. It was allowed to be there that way according to the building permit that we received, our first building permit. And them knowing that we wanted to apply for R2 variation. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Council have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Be it resolved, and I so move, that the public hearing for conditional use 11-22 for Justin and Andrea McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, in front of you, first of all, I'll point in reference to the sketch for the conditional use, and then draw your attention to the report to Council. So this is file number PC 11-22, once again a request for conditional use. The issue is to allow a secondary suite to be located above an existing detached garage. As alternatives, of course, we can approve the application as presented. We can approve the application with conditions, or we can deny the application as well. So as you heard, through the applicant, Justin and Andrew McCabe have applied for conditional use to allow for a secondary suite to be located above the existing detached garage, as the applicants would like to create a secondary suite for their mother to live in. The applicants had applied for a similar use request back in September of 2019 and December 2020. Your minute references are there for your reference, and those were defeated. The applicant has disconnected all plumbing and drain water lines, has fire-rated shutters on the east and south windows installed, and no one has been living in the space. So as a side note, if the conditional use is approved, the variance for side yards and maximum area of a secondary suite will also require council's approval. If approved, the applicants will be required to provide plans and information showing what second floor use is to be and how it is constructed, and a building and plumbing permit will also be required. The property is located in an R1 residential single-family zone. When the application was circulated to various city departments, there were the following concerns, and that was to ensure that all building and fire codes are meeting requirements and concern on the repeated application. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and you can see the objections that were filed. With that said, it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of Justin and Andrea McCabe to allow for a secondary suite to be located above existing detached garage in an R1 residential single-family zone at the property 102 First Street Southwest, which is legally described as Lot 3, Block 1, Plan 1998 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I'll speak
Councillor Meyer?
first. Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you guys for certainly coming and presenting your case. Although my position today, Council, has not changed from the last two positions I had in both September and December, I just want to, for the record, recognize the fact that I am a property owner within a 100-meter radius of this location. Although I'm not immediately or effectively impacted by it, I just want Council to know that my position here and my vote on this is strictly as my role as a councillor, and of course for the betterment of the entire community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Any further questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that is defeated. So our next public hearing is for a variation for the property at 102 First. Now, given that the conditional use was not allowed, the applicant has the right to withdraw the request for a variation. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'll withdraw.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe. Okay, we're going to move into committee. First up is Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple items on my agenda here tonight, both of which have been reviewed at committee meetings. And so the first item up for discussion is just the policy updates, collection of utility accounts. And basically it's just to amend our policy and approve the updated one. Excuse me. And a lot of those changes are incorporated around the Neptune water meters, billing dates and right of offsets for property tax accounts, applicable penalties, and amended letter for overdue utility accounts. Just as you've heard from me before, just policy updates. So it is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that the Council of City of Portage la Prairie approve the updated collection of utility accounts policy.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Thank you. My other item is an approval to deal with the 2022 municipal and school board election and whether or not we want to do that jointly with the Portage la Prairie School Division. I think everybody knows that we've been doing it together for some time. And so we basically anticipate the 2022 election cost to be approximately $29,000. And the school division has agreed to 50-50 cost share that once again this year. You can see with the chart there, just kind of outlining what those costs look like, the time and the advertising, supplies, etc. And then, of course, the breakdown of the two contributions. So it is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve conducting the 2022 election jointly with the Portage la Prairie School Division and splitting those expenses 50-50.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that does conclude my committee report, and you'll hear from me again in new business.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. City Planning and Economic Development, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing at this point, but there are a couple items later on the agenda.
Thank you. And Community Service Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for Community Services Committee this evening.
Thank you. And Waterworks Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for the Waterworks Committee this evening.
Thank you. And Transportation Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing at this point in the meeting.
And Public Safety Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing from your Public Safety Committee this evening.
Thank you. We have no deferred business this evening. We've got a number of items of new business, however. First item of new business is the 2021 interim financial results. And this is Finance Committee, Councillor Buds.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, we have some good news here to present to Council. And just a reminder, these are the pre-audit or in-house financial results for 2021. And so we have completed that in advance of our external audit. And they are expected to start their field work here in April. And of course, we will meet all our timelines as per usual every year. And we do plan on having our formal statements for Council's consideration in June. But we did end up with general and utility surpluses. So in the general fund, $1 million operating surplus. Now, there is there's kind of broken down into two areas. So it's actually about 1.9 million. And 600,000 is, as we've heard extensively, that there was a settlement reached with the Strive Place roof settlement, $600,000 for that. And then we did finally receive almost $300,000 for our disaster financial assistance claim for the 2019 ice storm. But aside from that, we did still run $900,000 in surpluses, of which we had planned actually and projected to be about $450,000 in surplus position in Q3. So all in all, on our general side, very good news. A lot of that is coming from kind of like one-off sources, as I mentioned before. On the utility side, $1 million operating surplus as well on that. And we did project over $600,000 at the end of the quarter three. So you can see that we are getting better at projecting surpluses. We did see overall water sales up, and that's what's contributing to the additional surpluses on the utility side. So if I'm the council, citizens, I'm wondering what is the city doing with these funds? Make no mistake, we have produced our capital plan. We've shown the massive amount of infrastructure dollars that are being deployed in our city to improve our city. And what we're recommending and what administration and I support is recommending to put these surplus funds in our general infrastructure reserve for future use. There's no question, again, as we've made a major commitment in several areas here in our city, which have already been built in contingencies. However, there could be those situations where we need to access additional funds. So it is a recommendation basically that we will, of course not tonight, we're just accepting the interim reports, but when we get these finalized numbers from our external prepared accountant and we get these numbers in, it will be a recommendation for your committee to move these into reserves. So on the general side, again, infrastructure, and on the utility side, setting aside some money specifically for our water treatment plant upgrade. That is another major capital project, and it will definitely benefit from some surplus dollars setting aside for it. So it is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the pre-audited 2021 financial statements.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions, comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Our next item of new business is the first reading of the use of municipal resources in an election. This is bylaw number 22-8734, and again, this is Finance Committee. Councillor Buds.
Thanks again, Your Worship. Something new here, and it is a recent amendment to the Municipal Act that basically has brought forward this bylaw. And that provision ensures that a council must pass a bylaw establishing rules and procedures for the use of municipal resources during the 42-day period before a general municipal election. And so this bylaw has to outline the resources that will be restricted, how it will be enforced, and what penalties will apply. And this bylaw must be passed at least 180 days prior to Election Day, which is April 29th. So this bylaw states that during that 42-day period before an election, candidates have restricted use of any resources owned or controlled by the municipalities, such as property, facilities, infrastructure, equipment, websites, social media accounts, and other communication tools or media. And candidates who contravene will receive a written warning for their first offense and a fine of $100 for all subsequent offenses. And a copy of this bylaw will be provided to each candidate running in election in their registration package. So very clearly outlines that municipal resources are not at the disposal of candidates for the next election, and it's punitive if that is being used. So it is an administrative recommendation. I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the use of municipal resources in an election bylaw 22-8734 by giving it first reading.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Next item of new business is the January and February building reports. And this is for information, and this is City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Worship. Council, I'll just draw your attention to a couple of different reports you'll see on the agenda. The January 2022 building report, the January 2022 combined building report, the February 2022 building report, and then the one that I always like to draw your attention to, of course, is the February 2022 combined building report. Now, I know I've said it before, but I would like just to take this opportunity to congratulate Lynn Anderson as the new manager of the Portage Planning District. Lynn brings with her a wealth of experience, and I certainly know she'll do extremely well within the role. You've also may have been alerted to it. It was on today's news story in regards, or today's local radio station in regards to the permit count for the year. And as I said, I always refer to it regionally because of the great relationship we have with the RM. So I do want to just point out that permit numbers are actually up from where they were last year. But as expected, and I know we've discussed it a number of times, we do know that values are down from that. And that was certainly to be expected with the incredible amount of industrial capacity and institutional and residential and commercial building that's been done in the last number of years. So with that said, though, I do want to recognize that there are a couple areas to point out too. One, you're going to see that there is actually an increase again in RTMs, which I think has become a cottage industry over the years, and we certainly want to see that expand as well. And then, of course, you'll do notice that there was some commercial activities as well that really added to it. So we had 22 permits this year, 20 permits last year. We were 5 million last year, and we were just over 1 million this year. So anyways, good job to the planning district for everything that they've done, and let's hope it continues. Thank you, Your Worship. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Next item of new business is the Active Transportation funding for a concrete sidewalk walk from Elm Street to West Park School. This is Community Service Committee. Councillor Draycott, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now I get to be the one with some exciting news about an application that we are voting on this evening. So the city of Portage la Prairie did receive numerous requests for a sidewalk as an issue location, at the issue location. So the project involves construction of a 100 millimeter cast in place concrete sidewalk, typically 1.5 meters wide and approximately 600 meters long. The sidewalks, approximately 600 meters long, will include the accessibility characteristics such as curb ramps, detectable mat adequate approach, and flare to improve safety and increase accessibility for residents from the south side of Saskatchewan Avenue to access West Park School and other nearby businesses. So the new sidewalk would greatly improve the safety of children and other users, such as wheelchair and mobility scooters. This sidewalk will also provide pedestrian access to shopping and restaurants for visitors staying at Canad Inns and improve pedestrian access to numerous other businesses in the area. So the engineering has completed the cost estimates as follows to install the sidewalk in this location. So total estimate project cost is $154,000. Total estimate eligible project cost is $154,000. So the total ATF amount requested would be $92,400, maximum program contribution of 60%, with the city share estimated at $61,600. So the city of Portage la Prairie share of this sidewalk project would be funded from the 2023 budget. The ATF anticipated approval would be the fall of 2022, with construction tender and contractor procurement tentatively scheduled for March to April of 2023. The work would be scheduled to start in May and to be completed in early summer of 2023. A resolution from the city of Portage la Prairie is recommended to support the application, and the application deadline would be March 31st, 2022. So I would say that the city is looking at this after a considerable amount of feedback when we were looking at the Saskatchewan Avenue project and improvements to be done in that area. And this lies outside of the scope of that project, but it was brought up to us numerous times as a concern to make sure that we are continuing that pathway in a logical way to protect the citizens that utilize that area. So I'm very excited about this application to the active transportation funding for this concrete sidewalk project. And it is the administrative recommendation that the Council of City of Portage la Prairie authorize an application to the Active Transportation Fund through Infrastructure Canada for a sidewalk project from Elm Street to West Park School and commit to funding 40% of the project costs up to $61,600. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Draycott and seconded by Councillor Knox. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Next item of new business is the award tender for residential solid waste contract. This is Transportation Committee. Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I must declare a conflict on this particular item, and with your blessing, I will step out during the discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Espy. Councillor Meyer.
I would love to take it over. Thank you, Your Worship. We'll just wait till Councillor Espy is gone. Okay, Council, to the Transportation Committee, of course, from Administration Operations. The issue is toward a 3-year contract for the collection of residential solid waste for Tender 22 Ops 007. So the alternative's a little different. Do not award the tender is one, or we can award the tender to MWM Environmental in option 2, which I'll explain in just a minute, or award the tender to Waste Connections of Canada, Inc. for option 1. You will see the options there. The analysis is that the tender was advertised, of course, on the city website and Marks. There were 7 companies were contacted, and the tender for the collection of residential solid waste closed on March the 15th of 2022. You will see the point system in regards to our process. The term of the contract we know is from 3 years, is from August 1, 2022 to July 31, 2025, and the tender requested the bidders to provide pricing on 2 options. So, option 1, quite simply, is what we currently have. Includes the collection of solid waste from all residential dwellings, including multiple family dwellings. Includes a fixed price of $2 for each approximately 51,000 waste tags over the 3 years at 17,000 a year for the use of extra bags or bulky items. For our consideration, option 2 is a lot more involved. It does include the use of an automated side tip truck with 363-liter rollout carts. These carts were included in the cost of the bid, to which the city would then own at the end of the contract. It does not include collection from multiple family dwellings where there's 6 or more units. This option, for your information, would require a separate tender for bulky waste collections, and they would do that at 3 times a year. The additional cost for this bulky waste collection contract is estimated to be about $25,000 per year. And it goes on to state that the benefits of the rollout carts include decreased collection costs, increased safety for the workers, and increased security of the waste. As an example, it's not accessible by dogs or other animals tearing it and ripping it across the city. If this option is chosen, the intention would also be to switch to a rollout cart system for recycling when that next recycling contract is awarded. Some of the other information for option 2, it was anticipated the cost approximately $420,000 for the initial supply and installation of the carts, and that cost would be paid out over 3 years of the contract. The carts do have an estimated 10-year lifetime, so we could expect actually some future contracts to be somewhat lower because we're not having to replace. So the price of the lowest bid for the 4,650 totes is $372,000. Savings annually are anticipated to be in the order of $74,000. But there would be a revenue loss of about $87,000 annually from no collection of apartments with 6 or more units. So the give and the take. The net revenue loss for option 2 is actually approximately about $10,000 per year. So the contract bids does include the tipping fees, and those of course are estimated at roughly $500,000 for the 3-year period. The contractor would pay the tipping fees at the landfill, and then the city would reimburse based on the tonnage. There is also provision for a CPI, or of course your consumer price index increase annually. So the low bidder, if you go back up to option number 2, is MWM Environmental. They came in at a price of $1,746,144.20, or a total sustainability of 96 points. I think maybe we are aware of MWM. They do have many contracts throughout the province. They've also met all qualifications and also provided positive suggestions for future contracts. In addition, they did include in their RFP consideration for those with physical limitations. So they did indicate that they would roll the cart to the curb and back to the house for any residents that are physically unable to do so, and they would also do this service at no charge. The current contract payment is roughly $26,700 per month. That does not include the waste collection tags or GST. When you do factor the tags in and no GST, the current contract costs about $29,500 a month, or $354,800 per year. So in the 2022 budget, we have roughly $376,000 or $30,700 a month for the first 7 months, and then $32,300 for the remaining 5 months. The tender price for the last 5 months of 2022, if you're following along, will be $32,966.77 net of GST, and not including tip and fees should come in close to our $3,300 budget. So the highest rated bidder for option 1 currently is our current provider for the city of Portage la Prairie. They have been the city's contractor for 18 years. And if council were to choose option 1, the contract should be awarded to Waste Connections of Canada for the tender price of $1,772,673.50 net of GST. So we're going to go with administrative recommendations. First recommendation, and that is that the council of the city of Portage la Prairie award the contract for the collection of residential solid waste, or option 2, for the 3-year period from August 1, 2022 to July 31, 2025, as specified in tender 22 Ops 007 to MWM Environmental at the tender price of $1,630,289.52 net of GST, and I so move.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Knox.
I just would like some clarification because I don't really understand what it says for the dwellings for 6 or more with option 2, and the bulky, that it's a collection of 3 times a year.
Through your worship to Councillor Knox, so I'll answer the first question. So any For example, the apartment unit that was proposed tonight has 8 units. They would be required to have their own waste disposal and contract that separately from the city. The reason is putting 8 bins in a back lane or in front of the property, it just becomes clunky and difficult to manage. So they would, under our system, they pay us a fee per unit, and that we collect a central bin. Under this new system, basically there would be a central bin that they'd be responsible for contracting on their own from a secondary provider. We wouldn't then charge them a per unit fee. I may ask Councillor Knox to repeat the second question.
That it's only 3 times a year.
Yes. So it's something that I think council should absolutely understand, because we are changing. Right now we have a truck and there's essentially people manually throwing that garbage in. For bulky collection, you put out your item, you put your sticker on it, and they take it, and everything from couches to dryers. Like it's a high level of service, I would say. When you have a system where you basically are taking a bin, and there's one person in the truck, the bin is grabbed electronically and put in the back, you can't provide that service at the level we currently have. So what administration would be recommending is you set up 3 or 4 times a year on your normal garbage day saying, we're collecting bulky items this week. This is your week. There wouldn't be the requirement for a sticker. You just have to put your bulky items, but you would get it 4 times a year, which currently people can get it whenever it's their garbage week, and they put the appropriate sticker on it, and it will be taken away. So I would say it's fair to make sure council understand that is a reduction in the level of service that we have.
Thank you.
Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Worship. I do have a couple of questions, just for clarification, because option 2 is very different than what we currently process. My first question is about additional garbage collection, because I do believe it's still stated in there that you could do additional garbage collection with a sticker. Is that also on option 2, or just if we are looking for option 1?
Through your worship to Councillor Draycott. So in option 2, the only way that you could do additional garbage collection would be on those additional bulky assigned weeks, which we're suggesting would be 3 or 4 times a year. Currently, for normal garbage, if you had, let's say you filled your 363 liter bin, you wouldn't be able to put out a secondary garbage can and have it collected.
And then, if I may, Your Worship, my second question is, how do you keep the bins where they are supposed to be? So I know that for each residence would have a bin, but what if the bin disappeared, was no longer at that resident for whatever the reason might be? How does that resident then get garbage collection going forward?
Through your worship to Councillor Draycott, so how this is managed in other cities, and I assume we would follow that model, is when you're assigned a garbage can, there would be a serial number on it, and that is your garbage can. So typically municipalities, if that garbage can disappears, the owner who is registered that garbage can would be responsible for the cost to replace it. As is, if it was damaged, for example, a broken wheel of some type, that resident would be responsible for the cost to repair that bin. It essentially is the resident's property, and they are responsible to maintain and keep it secure.
And I guess follow up, any idea on what the cost is of that to other municipalities?
Through your worship to Councillor Draycott, I would probably have to ask our Director of Operations if she has some figures on that.
I don't have the exact number, but it's around $90 to replace a bin. To replace the wheels or something would be less.
Councillor Buds?
Thank you, Worship. These are one of those situations where, I mean, I'm of the opinion if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't understand completely where this is coming from in terms of suggesting ultimately it is a reduction in service. That's just as plain and simple it is. We won't be picking up the same amount of garbage for residents as we currently do. It will be bulky items, not at the same time frame. If you do have those times when you have excess garbage, if you fill your bin, it's just not getting picked up. The other part that's not being considered here, and if you do some research in other cities that have struggled for the implementation of this, and it gets back to operations. There has to be not necessarily a new standard, but an understanding of these garbage can placements on the end of driveways so that it works fluidly. So there would be an impact in we talked about snow clearing here tonight already. It all has to work together, and currently that's not as big of an issue is if we do have actual manpower that's getting on and off the truck. So I won't be supporting the recommendation. I don't think it's a benefit to our city or our residents. And there isn't anywhere, outlined a significant cost savings for me to justify a reduction in service on, quite frankly, something that's working. So I won't support it.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Worship. I guess I have one more question. Most of the time when we look at changing something in our community that we have been doing in a way for a long time, there has to be a benefit to it to happen. And sometimes we look at that as a green benefit. That's one of our things that as a city we've kind of focused on. Is there a green benefit to doing this at all? Or is there a lack of benefit? If it's a safety to the workers, does that actually translate to less workers required to do this and therefore a reduction in jobs?
Through your worship to Councillor Draycott, I would probably break my answer into two parts. So I'll start with I believe you're asking, is there cost savings to the municipality over the long term on your first question? Is that accurate?
Sorry. Usually we look, if we're changing something as a community, we look at the green implications of something. So is there a benefit from a green standpoint for our community to move to option 2?
It would be tough to say, but what I would say is that our bylaw currently allows someone to put 2 bags or 2 basically vessels to put garbage in. That varies from house to house drastically. If you were to take a 360 liter container, if every resident filled that up significantly, then it would be probably a lot more waste than we've seen. What you hope that residents would do is they wouldn't bring it out until it was full, but that's not always the case in a lot of municipalities. So you hope to see that. So I couldn't argue that there is a green benefit necessarily by going to the system, besides the fact for a cost saving, if I could mention that. Sorry, one more comment on that. These garbage cans, I would say, arguably would be more secure than some of the methods currently used. A lot of people just put their bag out. There are situations where animals get into those that spread, etc. These would be more resistant also to, because they're larger units. Typically you see garbage cans blowing around, that type of things. These would be more resistant to that. So I think from a green perspective, I wouldn't say there would be less waste. I would say there'd probably be less situations where garbage was floating around the streets because of animals or because of bins blowing over. In terms of cost savings, I recognize this model has essentially come to where it's almost the same value to the organization in terms of costs. The one thing that isn't really clarified in the report is that we are buying the bins this contract, and then we still regain those bins for future contracts. And these aren't proprietary bins. They can be used by multiple contractors. So you would hope you would see a cost reduction because the capital cost is in this 3 years and the lifespan is 10 years. So hopefully you would see cost reductions in the future, but there's no guarantee of that. So I hope you've answered your question there, Councillor Draycott.
Further, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Worship. Just really a comment I want to make on it as well. And I certainly understand the resistance to change. And I'm all about change as long as we benefit from it. So, I mean, to echo Councillor Buds' comments, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Again, it's not an issue that I think we've had citizens come forward to say, hey, look, we have a garbage problem pickup in the city. I think the current contract has done real well. I do not see an awful lot of garbage. You do see the odd garbage can rolling around. I get that everywhere, but I think you would see the same thing with this. For this, I do not support the original administrative recommendation for specifically that reason as well, in the fact that, as I said, even though it's maybe a little bit more or cheaper, it's still not enough benefit for me to go to that kind of a drastic change at this stage. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Just get you to read back the motion so everybody's clear on which option they're voting on.
It was option 2, correct? That the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie award the contract for the collection of residential solid waste, option 2, for the 3-year period, August 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2025, as specified in Tender 22 Ops 007, to MWM Environmental at the tendered price of $1,630,289.52 net of GST.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion? And that motion is defeated.
With that motion, Your Worship, I would go to the secondary option. Secondary option reads, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie award the contract for the collection of residential solid waste, or option 1, for the 3-year period, being August 1, 2022 to July 31, 2025, as specified in tender 22 OPS 007, to Waste Connections of Canada, Inc. for the tender price of $1,772,673.50 net of GST.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
I'll just grab Councilor Buds.
Please.
Right here.
That's right. Hard to tell them apart.
Okay, our next item of new business is the second and third reading of amending boring bylaw. This is 21-8726, Phase 2 of Saskatchewan Avenue West, General Infrastructure. This is Finance Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, as you'd mentioned, this is under new business, but it is not new business to City Council. It is basically a borrowing bylaw to provide us with the authority to borrow some money for Phase 2 of Saskatchewan Avenue West. And so we did hold our public hearing on December the 13th to add $3.239 million in borrowing authority for the completion of that Phase 2. What happened after that is it went to the Municipal Board of Manitoba, who approved the borrowing authority on February 4th, 2022. And now we're ready to proceed with second and third reading of this bylaw. I think it's important to note that, this is a multi-year project. We do require to have all our funding in place and approved, even though the expenditures probably won't happen until 2024. And you heard earlier my report about general infrastructure reserve balances and some surpluses. So while we have to have it in place, we certainly hope that we don't always have to use it. And we're always, as you guys know, we are planning for the future. So we have to put it in place, and that's what the second and third reading is here to do tonight. So it is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that the bylaw 21-8726, being an amending bylaw of the City of Portage la Prairie to authorize the borrowing of up to $3,239,000 in additional funds for the completion of Saskatchewan Avenue West General Infrastructure Project be given second reading.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that bylaw 21-8726 be given third and final reading, finally passed, signed, and sealed.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. There being no more new business, council is adjourned at 7:27 p.m. And we're going to move right into committee. And committee is open to the media, and it is open to the public. Call committee to order at 7:27 p.m. First up is Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your committee has nothing to review here tonight.
City Planning and Economic Development Committee. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And Community Service Committee. Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Services Committee has nothing this evening.
Thank you. I see our youth counselors here with us tonight. Any news from our youth counselor? There we
So we were thinking of calling past youth counselors such as Arisha Agarwal to come speak to PCI, to our Sources of Strength group and our Student Council Leadership group. So we're thinking of doing that sometime in May when she comes back to Portage, as well as holding one more activity before the end of the year and conducting a survey to see what the students of PCI think we could do to help change Portage to make it better for them.
Okay, thank you. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for the Waterworks Committee this evening.
Thank you. And Transportation Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And finally, Public Safety, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing from your Public Safety Committee this evening.
Thank you. And committee is adjourned at 7:29 PM. Thank you for coming out, everybody.